The great hall of the Galactic Military Academy fell silent as Admiral Han of the Empire walked to the center of the stage. His silver scales caught the light from 100 floating lamps, and his 4 yellow eyes swept across the assembled cadets with the cold precision of a predator sizing up prey. Behind him, a massive holographic display flickered to life, showing a blue and green planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. "Earth," he said, and the word came out like a curse. "Home world of the humans, Class 7 Death World, the most dangerous training ground in the known galaxy." A nervous murmur spread through the crowd of alien cadets. There were over 300 of them, representing 47 different species from across the Galactic Confederacy. They had all heard stories about Earth. Everyone had heard stories about Earth. For the past 60 cycles, the Academy has sent its finest cadets to Earth for the ultimate survival examination, Admiral Han continued. The test is simple. Survive on the planet's surface for 100 standard hours. No advanced technology. No orbital support. Just you, your training, and whatever primitive tools you can create from the environment. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. In 60 cycles, not a single alien cadet has ever passed this examination. Not one. 412 cadets have attempted it. 412 have failed. Most were evacuated within the first planetary rotation. Many suffered severe injuries. 17 never returned at all. The holographic display changed, showing images that made several cadets look away in horror. A massive creature with brown fur and claws the length of swords. Storms that lit up the sky with electricity powerful enough to vaporize metal. Mountains that spewed liquid rock into the air. Oceans filled with predators that could swallow a transport shuttle whole. "Earth is not simply dangerous," Admiral Han said. "Earth is actively hostile to all forms of life. Its gravity is crushing. Its atmosphere is corrosive. Its weather systems are violent and unpredictable. Its native life forms have evolved over billions of years to become perfect killing machines. And yet somehow, impossibly, humans not only survive there but thrive." In the middle of the crowd, a young named listened with growing dread. Her species had evolved on a world of eternal twilight, where the temperature never varied more than a few degrees, and the most dangerous predator was a small insect that could give you a mild rash. The idea of a world where the sun itself could burn your skin seemed like something from a nightmare. "This cycle, the High Council has made a decision," Admiral Han announced. "All command track cadets will be required to attempt the Earth examination. There will be no exceptions. Those who refuse will be immediately dismissed from the Academy." The hall erupted in protests. Cadets shouted in a dozen different languages, their translators struggling to keep up with the chaos. Felt her heart's pounding in her chest. She had worked her entire life to reach the command track. Her family had sacrificed everything to give her this opportunity, and now she was being told she had to go to Earth or give up her dreams forever. Admiral Han raised one clawed hand, and the room fell silent again. "I understand your fear. Fear is a rational response to Earth, but the Council believes that any officer who wishes to command ships and lead soldiers must first prove they can survive the worst the galaxy has to offer." His scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Besides, you will not be completely alone. The humans have agreed to provide guides. They seem to think they can teach you to survive on their death world." He stepped aside, and a human walked onto the stage. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching Han's shoulder, with dark hair tied back and a confident stride that seemed completely out of place given the circumstances. Her name tag identified her as Lieutenant Morgan, and she smiled at the terrified crowd as if she were greeting friends at a social gathering. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I know you're scared. That's actually a good thing. Fear keeps you alert, and alert people survive. But I want to tell you something that Admiral Han left out of his presentation." She tapped a device on her wrist, and the holographic display changed again. This time it showed a human child, perhaps 6 years old, running through a field of tall grass with a huge smile on her face. In the background, mountains rose toward a blue sky dotted with white clouds. "This is my niece, Emma. She's camping this weekend in a place called Montana. It has bears, mountain lions, sudden snowstorms, and terrain that would be classified as extreme on most Confederacy worlds." Paused, letting that sink in. "She's having the best time of her life." The cadet stared at the image in confusion. How could a child so small survive in such a dangerous environment? "Earth isn't trying to kill you," continued. "I know that sounds crazy given everything you've heard, but it's true. Earth is just being Earth. The storms aren't hunting you. The predators aren't specifically targeting you. The sun isn't your enemy. They're all just doing what they've always done. The difference between dying on Earth and thriving on Earth isn't about being stronger or faster or tougher than the planet. It's about understanding how the planet works and working with it instead of against it." She looked out at the crowd, and could have sworn the human's eyes met hers for just a moment. "Humans didn't conquer Earth. We learned to live with it. We watched the animals and learned which ones were dangerous and which ones weren't. We studied the weather and learned to predict when storms were coming. We tested the plants and learned which ones would feed us and which ones would poison us. Everything we know, we learned the hard way, over millions of years of trial and error. And now we're going to share that knowledge with you." Admiral Hand stepped forward again, his expression unreadable. "The examination will begin in 30 standard rotations. You will spend that time in intensive preparation with your assigned human guides. I suggest you pay attention to their instruction. Your lives will depend on it." As the cadets filed out of the great hall, found herself walking beside a massive named. His rocky hide and enormous size made him look like he could survive anywhere, but even he seemed shaken by what they had heard. "Do you think the human was telling the truth?" he asked, his voice like grinding stones. "About Earth not trying to kill us?" Thought about the image of the little girl running through the field, so small and fragile and completely unafraid. "I think," she said slowly, "that we have a lot to learn." The 30 days of preparation passed faster than could have imagined. Every morning she woke before the artificial dawn and reported to the training center, where Morgan and her team of human instructors were waiting with new lessons and new challenges. Every night she fell into her sleeping pod exhausted, her mind spinning with information about a world she had never seen but was beginning to understand. Was patient in ways that surprised. On her home world, instructors were harsh and critical, pushing students to excel through shame and competition, but never raised her voice, never insulted her students, never made them feel stupid for asking questions. When struggled to understand something, simply explained it again in a different way, using examples and demonstrations until the concept finally clicked into place. "On Earth, we have a saying," told her one day as they practiced building a shelter from branches and leaves. "The teacher has not succeeded until the student has learned. If you don't understand something, that's my failure, not yours." "That seems inefficient," said, struggling with the knots had shown her. "Would it not be faster to simply dismiss the students who cannot keep up?" Shook her head. "Faster isn't always better. Some of the best people I've ever worked with were slow learners. They asked more questions, thought more deeply about the material, and ended up understanding it better than the people who picked it up quickly. Give yourself time. You're learning skills that took my species millions of years to develop." Slowly, piece by piece, began to build a picture of Earth in her mind. She learned about the different environments, from the frozen wastes of the poles to the burning deserts near the equator. She learned about the animals, which ones were dangerous and which ones were harmless, and how to tell the difference. She learned about the plants, which ones could save her life and which ones could end it. She learned about the weather, how to read the clouds and the wind and the pressure changes that meant a storm was coming. But most importantly, she learned about humans. "You have to understand," explained during one of their evening sessions, "Earth isn't like most worlds. It doesn't coddle life. It tests it constantly, relentlessly. Every species on our planet has been forged in fire, including us. We're not the strongest creatures on Earth or the fastest or the toughest. We don't have claws or fangs or armor. What we have is this. She tapped her temple. Our brains, our ability to think, to plan, to learn, to adapt. When we encountered a predator too strong to fight, we made weapons. When we faced weather too harsh to endure, we built shelters. When we found food too scarce to sustain us, we invented agriculture. Every problem Earth threw at us, we solved. Not by becoming better animals, but by becoming better thinkers. Found this fascinating. Her own species had evolved on a world where survival was easy, where food was plentiful and predators were rare. They had never needed to become creative to stay alive. But humans had been forced to innovate from the very beginning, and that constant pressure had shaped them into something unique in the galaxy. "Is that why humans are so good at war?" she asked. His expression grew serious. "We're good at war because we've had a lot of practice fighting each other. That's not something I'm proud of. But yes, the same qualities that helped us survive Earth also made us effective soldiers. The ability to plan, to coordinate, to adapt to changing circumstances, to keep fighting even when the odds seem impossible." She paused. The galaxy was shocked when they first encountered us. They expected a species from a death world to be savage, brutal, mindless. Instead, they found a civilization that had already been to its own moon, split the atom, and created global networks of communication. We surprised them. "You surprised everyone," agreed. The day before departure, gathered all the cadets for a final briefing. There were 18 of them now, representing 12 different species, all bound for Earth on the same transport ship. They had trained together for a month, and despite their differences, had come to think of them almost as friends. "Tomorrow you will set foot on Earth for the first time," said. "Everything you've learned in the past 30 days has been preparing you for this moment, but I want to be honest with you. Training can only do so much. Earth will surprise you. It will challenge you in ways you can't predict. Things will go wrong. Plans will fail. You will face situations that seem impossible." She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze steady and confident. "When that happens, remember this. You are not alone. You have each other and you have us. The human guides will be with you every step of the way. We won't do the work for you because that would defeat the purpose of the examination. But we will teach you, guide you, and if necessary, save your lives. No one is going to die on my watch." Raised his rocky hand. "What if we fail? What happens then?" "Then you fail," said simply. "Failure is not death. Failure is information. It tells you what you need to work on, what you need to learn, what you need to change. Some of the best human leaders in history failed multiple times before they succeeded. The only true failure is giving up." That night lay in her sleeping pod and thought about everything she had learned. She thought about the little human girl running through the field, unafraid of the bears and mountain lions that lived nearby. She thought about patience, her kindness, her absolute confidence that her students could succeed. She thought about the millions of years of human evolution, all that suffering and struggle and death, that had produced a species capable of thriving on a world that should have killed them. And for the first time since Admiral Hand's announcement, felt something other than fear. She felt ready. The transport ship left the next morning, carrying 18 nervous alien cadets and 6 calm human guides toward a blue and green planet that spun slowly in the darkness of space. Earth was waiting for them, and was determined to prove that she could survive it. The transport ship broke through the clouds and got her first look at Earth through the viewport window. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. The planet was alive in a way that description, covered in swirling patterns of white and blue and green that shifted and changed even as she watched. Mountains rose like broken teeth from carpets of forest so dense they looked like solid ground from above. Rivers carved silver paths through valleys that seemed to go on forever, and everywhere, there was color. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said, appearing beside her. "It's terrifying," admitted. "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive," smiled. The most beautiful things in the universe are often the most dangerous. Stars, black holes, lightning storms. Earth is just continuing that tradition. They landed in a region called the Pacific Northwest, on the western coast of a continent called North America. The moment the ship's doors opened, was hit by a wave of sensation so overwhelming she nearly fell over. The air was thick with moisture and filled with smells her antennae couldn't identify. The temperature was cool but not cold, and a light mist hung in the air like a living curtain. And the sounds, so many sounds. Birds calling from the trees, water dripping from leaves, insects buzzing through the undergrowth, and beneath it all, a deep, constant hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. "That's life you're hearing," said, noticing her reaction. "Earth is never quiet. There's always something living, growing, moving, hunting, dying. It takes some getting used to." The cadets were divided into groups of 3, each assigned to a human guide. Was paired with thee and a small, nervous named. Their guide was, which filled with relief. She had come to trust the human over the past month, and that trust seemed more important now than ever. "Our first objective is simple," explained as they set off into the forest. "We're going to hike 5 kilometers to a clearing where we'll make camp for the night. Along the way, I'll point out important features of the environment. Watch everything. Remember everything. What you learn today could save your life tomorrow." The hike was harder than expected. The ground was uneven and covered with obstacles, fallen trees and rocks, and tangled roots that seemed designed to trip her at every step. The gravity was slightly higher than she was used to, making her legs ache after the first kilometer. And the forest itself seemed to close in around them, the massive trees blocking out the sky and creating a green twilight that played tricks on her eyes. But moved through it all like she was walking through her own home. She stepped over obstacles without looking, ducked under branches at exactly the right moment, and somehow always knew where to put her feet even when the path seemed invisible. It was like watching someone speak a language that couldn't understand. "There," said, pointing to a plant with 3 shiny leaves. "Poison ivy. Don't touch it unless you want to spend the next week covered in itchy blisters. And over there, see those berries? Those are safe to eat. They're called huckleberries. Try one." Carefully picked one of the small purple fruits and placed it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue, sweet and tart, and unlike anything she had ever experienced before. "Good?" asked. "It's wonderful," said, surprised by her own reaction. "Earth has a lot of wonderful things, if you know where to look." They continued through the forest and kept up a running commentary on everything they passed. She pointed out animal tracks in the mud, explaining which creatures had made them and how recently. She showed them how to find water by following the slope of the land and listening for the sound of running streams. She taught them to read the bark of trees to determine which direction was north. "How do you know all of this?" asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Practice," said, "and necessity. My grandfather grew up in these woods. He taught my mother and she taught me. Humans have been passing down survival knowledge for thousands of generations. It's how we made it this far." As the day wore on, they encountered their first Earth predator. Stopped suddenly, holding up one hand in a signal for silence. Through the trees, perhaps 50 meters away, a large animal was moving through the undergrowth. It was covered in brown fur and stood on 4 legs, its massive body rippling with muscle as it walked. "Black bear," whispered. "Female probably has cubs nearby. Stay calm, don't run." Felt her heart's pounding so hard she was certain the creature could hear them. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to flee, to get away from this predator as fast as possible. But she remembered her training, remembered everything had taught her about staying calm in dangerous situations. "We're going to make some noise," said quietly. "Let her know we're here so we don't surprise her. Bears don't like surprises." She began speaking in a normal voice, not shouting but loud enough to carry through the trees. "Hey there, bear, just passing through. We don't want any trouble. You go your way, we'll go ours." The bear stopped and turned its massive head toward them. For one terrible moment was certain it was going to charge. But then it simply snorted, turned away, and continued on its path through the forest, disappearing into the green shadows as silently as it had come. "That's it?" asked, his rocky voice higher than usual. "That's it," confirmed. "Bears are actually pretty peaceful unless you threaten them or their cubs. We weren't a threat, so she had no reason to bother with us. Most predators are like that. They don't hunt for fun. They hunt because they're hungry. If you're not food and you're not a threat, they'll usually leave you alone." They reached the clearing as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that made visual receptors ache with their intensity. Showed them how to set up a basic camp, how to build a fire that would keep them warm through the night, and how to hang their food from a tree branch so it wouldn't attract scavengers. That night, lying beside the crackling fire and listening to the endless symphony of Earth's nighttime creatures, realized something that surprised her. She wasn't afraid anymore. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but it had transformed into something else. Respect, perhaps, or maybe even admiration. Earth was dangerous, but it was also beautiful and strange and full of wonders she had never imagined. And somehow, against all odds, she was surviving it. The third day of the examination brought the solo challenge that had been dreading since the moment she learned about it. Each cadet would spend 24 standard hours alone in the wilderness, with their guide monitoring from a distance but not intervening unless there was a life-threatening emergency. It was designed to prove that they could survive Earth without constant supervision, and it was the part of the test that had broken the most previous cadets. "You have everything you need," told her as the sun rose over the forest. "You have knowledge, you have skills, and most importantly, you have the ability to think through problems. Trust yourself. You're more capable than you believe. What if something goes wrong?" "Something will go wrong. That's not a question of if, it's a question of when." Placed her hand on shoulder, a gesture of human affection that had become familiar over the past weeks. "When it happens, don't panic. Stop, breathe, think. Assess the situation, consider your options, make a decision, act. That's the process. It works for everything from getting lost to facing a predator. Stop, breathe, think, act." Repeated the words like a mantra as she set off into the forest alone. Stop, breathe, think, act. The morning passed slowly, filled with small tasks that kept her mind occupied. She found a water source, a small stream that bubbled over rock smooth from centuries of wear. She gathered edible plants, carefully checking each one against the mental catalog had helped her build. She built a shelter using fallen branches and leaves, creating a small waterproof structure that would protect her from rain and wind. By midday, she was feeling almost confident. Perhaps this wouldn't be as difficult as she had feared. Perhaps all those stories about Earth were exaggerated. Perhaps she was actually going to pass this examination without any major problems. And then the weather changed. It happened faster than could have imagined. One moment the sky was blue and clear. The next it was filled with dark clouds that rolled in from the horizon like a living wall of shadow. The wind picked up, bending the trees and sending leaves spiraling through the air. In the distance, she heard a sound like nothing she had ever experienced before, a deep rumbling that seemed to shake the very earth beneath her feet. Thunder, her translator supplied, a natural phenomenon caused by the rapid expansion of air heated by lightning. Lightning, electricity from the sky, one of Earth's many ways of killing things that didn't belong. For a moment froze. Every instinct told her to run, to find shelter, to hide from the storm that was rapidly approaching. But she remembered words. Stop, breathe, think, act. She stopped. She took a deep breath, forcing her heart to slow down. She thought about her situation. She was in an exposed area, surrounded by tall trees. Lightning tended to strike the highest points, which meant the trees were actually more dangerous than the open ground. But she had passed a rocky overhang earlier in the day, perhaps a kilometer back along her path. It would provide shelter from the wind and rain, and the rock would offer some protection from lightning strikes. She acted. Turning back the way she had come, she began moving as quickly as she could through the increasingly violent weather. Rain started falling in sheets so thick she could barely see 3 meters ahead. The wind howled through the trees like a living thing, and lightning flashed across the sky in brilliant white arcs that left afterimages burned into her vision. The hike that had taken 30 minutes in calm weather took almost an hour in the storm. By the time reached the overhang, she was soaked through and shaking with cold and exhaustion. But she had made it. She was alive. She huddled under the rock and watched the storm rage around her. It was terrifying and magnificent all at once, a display of raw power that made the mightiest weapons of the Galactic Confederacy seem like toys. Lightning split the sky again and again, striking trees with explosive force that sent splinters flying in all directions. Thunder crashed so loud it seemed to vibrate in her bones. Rain fell in quantities that would have caused floods on her home world. And yet through it all, life continued. Birds took shelter in the branches of trees, their feathers fluffed against the cold. Small animals hid in burrows and hollow logs, waiting for the storm to pass. Insects clung to the undersides of leaves, riding out the wind with patient determination. Earth's creatures had faced storms like this for billions of years. They knew how to survive. Realized that she was learning the same lesson. The storm wasn't attacking her. It wasn't hunting her. It was simply happening, a natural process as old as the planet itself. Her job wasn't to fight it or flee from it. Her job was to understand it, respect it, and wait for it to pass. The storm lasted for 3 hours. When it finally ended, the sun broke through the clouds and bathed the forest in golden light. Water dripped from every surface, and the air smelled clean and fresh in a way that made antennae tingle with pleasure. She emerged from her shelter and looked around at a world that had been transformed by the violence she had just witnessed. Trees had fallen, the landscape had changed, but life was already returning to normal. Birds began to sing again. Animals emerged from their hiding places. Insects took to the air, their wings catching the sunlight like tiny jewels. Earth had thrown its worst at her, and she had survived. The rest of the solo challenge passed without major incident. Found her way back to the clearing where she had built her shelter, which had survived the storm with only minor damage. She repaired it, gathered more food, and spent the night listening to the sounds of the forest recovering from the day's violence. When the signal came that her 24 hours were up, she almost felt disappointed. Something had changed inside her during the storm. Fear had transformed into something else, something stronger. She had faced Earth at its most dangerous and come through the other side. Whatever else happened, nothing could take that away from her. Was waiting at the rendezvous point, a proud smile on her face. "I watched the whole thing," she said. "The way you handled that storm, the way you stayed calm and made good decisions under pressure, that was textbook survival behavior. I couldn't have done it better myself." "I was terrified," admitted. "Of course you were. Only fools aren't scared of thunderstorms, but you didn't let the fear control you. That's what matters." Paused. "How do you feel?" Considered the question carefully. How did she feel? Her body was exhausted and sore in places she didn't know could be sore. Her mind was still processing everything that had happened over the past day, but beneath all of that there was something else, something unexpected. "I feel alive," she said finally, "more alive than I've ever felt before." Nodded as if this was exactly the answer she had expected. Welcome to Earth. The final day of the examination arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine that seemed like a reward for everything they had endured. All 18 cadets had survived their solo challenges, a result that had apparently caused considerable shock back at the academy. When Admiral Han received the preliminary reports, he had demanded they be 3 times before he would believe them. The last challenge was a group exercise. All 18 cadets working together had to traverse 20 kilometers of wilderness and reach a designated extraction point before sunset. They would have access to their human guides for advice, but the decisions would be theirs to make. It was a test of everything they had learned, not just about Earth, but about working together as a team. Found herself naturally taking a leadership role. Her experience with the storm had given her confidence, and the other cadets seemed to recognize that she had changed over the past 100 hours. Even, whose rocky hide and massive size made him seem like the obvious leader, deferred to her judgment on matters of navigation and strategy. "You see the land differently now," he observed as they studied the terrain ahead, "like a human does." "Taught me how to read the signs," said. "The way the water flows, the patterns in the vegetation, the behavior of the animals. It all tells a story if you know how to listen." They set off at a steady pace, moving through the forest in a loose formation that allowed them to support each other while still covering ground efficiently. The terrain was challenging but manageable, a series of hills and valleys that required careful navigation but never became truly dangerous. Along the way, they encountered more of Earth's wildlife, including a family of deer that watched them pass with curious eyes and a hawk that circled overhead like a living drone. Around midday, they faced their biggest challenge. The path ahead was blocked by a river, swollen from the recent storms and moving with a speed that made crossing seem impossible. Previous cadets might have panicked, might have given up, might have called for emergency evacuation. But these cadets had been taught by humans, and humans did not give up when faced with obstacles. "We need to find a safer crossing point," said, studying the water. "The current is weakest near the banks, especially where there are large rocks to break the flow. If we move upstream, we might find a place where the river widens and the water moves more slowly." The nervous who had barely spoken during the first days of the examination raised one thin hand. "I saw a place like that about half a kilometer back. The river curved around a large rock formation, and there were several exposed stones that might serve as stepping points." Nodded, "Good observation, lead the way." They backtracked to the spot had described, and sure enough, the river was crossable there. It took patience and careful coordination, but they managed to get all 18 cadets across without anyone falling in. When the last cadet reached the far bank, a cheer went up that echoed through the forest. "That was excellent teamwork," said, appearing beside as if by magic. "You identified the problem, delegated responsibilities, and executed a solution that used everyone's strengths. That's exactly what command officers need to be able to do." "I learned from watching you," replied. "You learned from doing. That's different and more important." Gestured toward the distant mountains that marked their destination. "5 more kilometers, you're almost there." The final stretch of the journey passed in a kind of dream. His body was exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced, her muscles aching and her joints protesting every step. But her mind was clearer than it had ever been, filled with a sense of purpose and accomplishment that made the physical pain seem almost irrelevant. They reached the extraction point with 2 hours to spare. The transport ship was waiting in a clearing, its familiar shape looking almost alien after so many days surrounded by the organic chaos of Earth's wilderness. Admiral Han was there as well, his silver scales gleaming in the late afternoon light and his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been disbelief. "All 18 cadets have completed the examination," he said, as if speaking the words aloud might make them more believable. "This is unprecedented. In the entire history of the Academy, no alien cadet has ever survived the Earth examination. Now you're telling me that not only did all of you survive, but you did so without a single emergency evacuation or serious injury." Stepped forward. "With respect, Admiral, the previous examinations were designed to fail. Cadets were sent to Earth with inadequate preparation and no understanding of how to work with the environment instead of against it. They were told Earth was their enemy, so they acted like prey animals in a predator's den. Fear made them careless, and carelessness got them hurt." "And what did you do differently?" "We taught them to think like humans, to see challenges as problems to be solved rather than disasters to be survived, to understand that Earth isn't malevolent, just indifferent, and that indifference can be worked with in ways that malevolence cannot. Looked back at the cadets, her expression warm with pride. They did the hard work. We just showed them it was possible. Stepped forward to stand beside. What I learned on Earth wasn't just about survival, she said. It was about perspective. My entire life, I've been taught that danger is something to be avoided, that safety comes from isolation and caution. But humans taught me that danger can be managed, that challenges can make you stronger, and that the universe is full of wonders that only reveal themselves to those brave enough to face their fears. Joined them, his rocky voice soft with emotion. I would like to return to Earth, not for another examination but to learn more. There is so much this world can teach us if we're willing to listen. One by one, the other cadets voiced their agreement. They had come to Earth expecting to die. Instead, they had found something far more valuable than survival. They had found a new way of seeing the universe. Admiral Han was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its edge of contempt. I will recommend to the High Council that the Earth examination be restructured according to the methods demonstrated here, and I will suggest that human instructors be permanently assigned to the Academy. He paused, his scales rippling in a pattern that's translator identified as respect. It seems we have much to learn from your species, Lieutenant Morgan. Smiled, and we from you, Admiral. That's kind of the point. Later, as the transport ship climbed toward the stars and Earth shrank to a blue and green marble behind them, pressed her face to the viewport, and watched the planet that had changed her life fade into the distance. She thought about everything she had experienced over the past 100 hours, the fear and the wonder, the danger and the beauty, the moment when she had stopped being afraid and started being alive. You look different, said, settling into the seat beside her. Something in your eyes. I am different, replied. Earth made me different. Earth does that, looked out at the stars. It's been doing it for 4 billion years, first to single cells, then to fish, then to lizards and mammals, and eventually to us. Every species that survives on Earth becomes something stronger, something more adaptable, something better suited to face whatever challenges come next. She smiled. Welcome to the family. Looked at her friend, this small, fragile human from a world that should have killed her ancestors 1,000,000 times over. Thank you, she said, for everything. Don't thank me yet, replied. The easy part is over, now comes the hard part. What's that? Smile widened, teaching the rest of the galaxy what you've learned. And, looking out at the infinite darkness of space, found herself looking forward to the challenge.